Today we're going to be talking about commands and orders in Latin. Now, I want to explain all the different ways that you can express a command in Latin. And so the English concept that I'm going to be talking about is the idea that whenever the speaker directs whoever his audience is to take part in a specific order. So it might be something like if I were saying to you, go do your homework, that would be a command or an order. Or I could address all of us collectively and say, let's all do our homework, and that would also be an order. So there are three ways that we can indicate direct commands in Latin. The first is called the imperative, and the second is called the hortatory subjunctive, and the third is called the jussive subjunctive. Okay? These direct commands all appear as independent clauses in and of their own rights, and these commands can take direct objects. We also have indirect commands, so this is when someone summarizes an order or a request that they made in direct speech. Okay, so let's start with the first form of direct command, which is called an imperative. Okay, and so the key thing to remember about an imperative is that imperative refers to the mood that the verb has. So these are not indicative or subjunctive verbs, but they are imperative verbs. And they are almost always in the second person. So this is when a speaker is directly addressing someone they're in conversation with. Okay, they can be either singular or plural. To give you two examples, from the verb audio, audiri, audivi, auditus, we have the imperative audi, singular, which means listen, and it's addressed to one addressee. We have the plural audite, which also means listen, but it is addressed to multiple addressees. Okay. Now, in terms of imperatives, the key to forming them is that we have to use the second principal part, and they're pretty simple to form. When we're dealing with a first, so second or fourth conjugation verb, so amo amare as a first, moneo monere as a second, audio audire as a fourth, the process is very simple. So we start from the second principal part and we chop off the re to get our present active stem. Now that stem is the singular imperative. So from amare we get ama, which means love. And from audire we get audi, which means listen. And simply to make these imperatives plural, all we do is add a te at the end. So ama becomes amate, okay, which means love, addressing multiple people, and audi becomes audite, listen, addressing multiple people. Of course, our exception comes in the third conjugation. And here again, though, we start with that second principal part and chop off the re to get the singular imperative. So the verb rego, regere becomes rege, rule, and capio capere becomes cape, which means take in the singular imperative. Now, the difference comes in the plural imperative here. So we change the e to an I, and then we add te. So rege becomes regite, which means to rule, which means rule, and it's addressed to multiple people. Okay. Of course, there are a few exceptions. These can be nicely remembered because they kind of fit an easy mnemonic. So the singular imperatives of dicere, to speak, ducere, to lead, facere, to do, and fere, to carry, are all slightly different. So they lack the usual e that we see at the end of our imperatives. So we have dic for speak, duc for lead, fac for do, and fere for carry. Okay, and frequently you will hear people refer to this as dic, duc, fac, and fere, referring to singular imperatives that are lacking an e. Okay, the plural imperative of fere, right, to carry, is slightly different as well. It's just ferte, which again is addressed to multiple people and expresses the order carry. So imperatives are pretty simple. This is basically what we view as a direct command in English. It's addressed to a second person audience, someone that you're speaking to, right? And it orders them to do something. Now, what if we want to express an order beyond a second person order? We want to kind of have an order that includes the first person, so I or we, or refers to a third person, sort of a group of people outside of the audience. So to give us an example, we might say, let's all study, right? So that's an order both for you to study and for me as well as the speaker to study. That's a first person command. We can think of a third person command in terms of Marie Antoinette's famous "let them eat cake" phrase, which basically ordered people who were not including the speaker and not including the interlocutor to do something, right? And so the imperative, as we saw, focuses on the second person. We're going to use subjunctives in independent clauses to focus on the other two people. So if we want to express a first person command, so that's let us do something, right? We use a present subjunctive in an independent clause. This use of the subjunctive is called the hortatory subjunctive. And we translate it as let me, let us, or let's. And I've given you two examples here. Ludum aspiciamus, which means let us watch the games. There, aspiciamus is present subjunctive functioning as a hortatory subjunctive, and we translate it as let us watch the games. We also have eamus ad hostes, our second example. Let us go towards the enemy. Here again, we have a present subjunctive of the verb eo ire, to go, right? And again, we translate it as let us go towards the enemy. The jussive subjunctive is what we use if we want to express a command in third person, right? So if we want to command somebody who we're not talking to, who's outside of the regular frame of our conversation, okay? And we translate it as let him or her if it's singular, or let them if it's plural, okay? So our first example, right, this jussive subjunctive using a present subjunctive, bona verba dicat, right? So dicat there is our present subjunctive verb, and we translate it as let him speak good words, okay? If we move to feminae audaciter faciant, okay, then we would translate it as let the women, right, that's our subject, act bravely. That's what facio means, right? So let the women act bravely. So we use the jussive and the hortatory subjunctive to indicate commands that are not in second person, that either involve the speaker and other people, so that's a hortatory subjunctive using the first person, or refers to people outside of a conversation, a third person group. And we use the jussive subjunctive for that. Now, how do we negate a command, right? We've talked about making positive commands. What if we want to say, don't do something, as we frequently do in English? Now, there are a couple ways that we can negate a command. So we can negate an imperative by using noli or nolite plus the infinitive. So noli and nolite, if you guys remember, comes from the verb nolo, nole, nolui, which means to not want. So here we're using the imperative forms, noli and nolite, plus an infinitive to express that the speaker does not want someone to do something. So noli ire, as you see in the example, means don't go. And that addresses a single person, right? It's telling one person they're speaking with not to go. Nolite ire, which is the plural, means don't go, but has multiple addressees. So we use the imperative of nolo, right, noli or nolite, plus the infinitive to negate an imperative. Okay. Another way we can do a negative command is sometimes we will use ne plus a second or third person perfect subjunctive to negate the command. And this is called the prohibitive subjunctive. So the example we have here, ne timueris, don't be afraid, right? Literally, don't you be afraid, can be used to negate a command. This is fairly rare, much more rare than noli plus the infinitive, or the third example that we're looking at. The third example is if we're negating explicitly a hortatory or jussive subjunctive, we simply use ne plus the subjunctive. Ne eamus ad ludum, let us not go to the games. Or ne veniat domum, let him not go home, right? So here we use ne to negate the hortatory or the jussive subjunctive. The final topic we're going to cover today is indirect commands. So if the speaker is summarizing a command that somebody else gave to somebody, okay? And these indirect commands have three parts. So first, they have a verb of commanding, requesting, or encouraging, like the verb hortor, to urge, rogo, I ask, or impero, I order, okay? And that's in the independent clause. It'll be followed by a subordinating conjunction, either ut or ne, ut if it's positive, ne if it's negative, and a subjunctive verb after that ut or ne in the present or imperfect tense that tells us what the words of the command were. So here are a couple examples. Rogo ut verba eus audiant. Okay, so here, rogo is our verb of ordering or asking or requesting. Rogo, I ask, and then we have ut, which we're going to translate in an indirect command as that. I ask that they hear his words. Audiant in the subjunctive, I ask that they hear his words. Okay. Sometimes you'll see this construction where there's a direct object after the verb of asking, encouraging, or ordering. Rogo milites, I ask the soldiers, and then we have that same construction after that they hear his words. Or we could say that they hear, or I ask the soldiers to hear his words. Okay. Finally, we have imperavit ne canes vocarent. There, imperavit ne canes vocarent means he ordered that they not call the dogs, right? Here we're using ne to indicate a negative indirect command, okay? He ordered that they not call the dogs, okay? So to sum up, there are 4 different ways that we can express a command in Latin. The first 3 are direct commands, where we are directly quoting an order to someone else, okay? And here we can use the imperative, right, which as we saw, is related to the second principal part. We can use the hortatory subjunctive when we want to make an order in the first person, right, to say, let us do something. And we use the jussive subjunctive when we're talking about a third person order, right, when we're commanding people outside of a conversation to do something. The fourth way is the indirect command, where we summarize using a verb of exhorting, recommending, asking, plus ut or ne, and then a subjunctive verb to express what they were commanded to do. Okay, so that is a very, very quick summary of all the different ways you can make commands in Latin. If you have any questions, feel free to email me or to compare and contrast what I've said with the notes that you find on your textbook. All right. Well, I will hope all of you guys have a great rest of your day, and I will talk to you guys again soon.